other than the other obvious barriers of men being vulnerable and being able to share their
Yeah.
vulnerabilities and doing that, what would you say? Because I know you've written extensively and you've spoken about. I mean, I read your Shades of Noir article where you talk about the locus of
Yeah.
control, and looking at how we kind of navigate and negotiate mental health and well-being for ourselves, and
Yeah.
often it's located in the external
Yeah.
in terms of getting that support. Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think there are like I said, the issue in the black community when it comes to mental health is multifaceted. There are just a lot of variables, and which is what makes it so difficult, and which is why it's such a big problem. And I think one thing that I really thought might really apply in this case is the locus of control, which is like the extent to which one, as in the person that is going through something, perceives the factors affecting their lives is external, as in
Yeah.
like dealing with something else, either it's fate, life, God, whatever
Yeah.
it is, affecting their lives, which means unable they can't circumvent, they can only just sit along for the ride,
Mm.
or the extent to which the person feels like
They have
it's
agency
internal,
to,
which
yeah.
means that they can actually affect things.
Mm.
So sequences of decisions can change the course of their lives. So I I think I personally believe that it's very much external for a lot of us. We feel like we just have to sit along for the ride, and I think there are many things in society that would sort of beam that idea into our heads. Starting with the fact that when in mental health, in we don't see ourselves in practitioners at all.
Yeah,
As in
yeah,
that's
and
one of
I
them
love that
that
from
we
what I
don't
was
see
reading.
exactly. We don't
Yeah,
see
in the
ourselves in
article.
practitioners. So if we don't see ourselves in practitioners, then we'll just be like, okay, well, let's go and see the doctor. Let's go and see this doctor or that. I'm not saying anything wrong with going to see the doctor, but then when that becomes a situation where you don't even look within yourself to see how you could alleviate some of the stresses
Sure.
that you're going through, then
So it's
and
kind
then
of not having agency, not
exactly.
being able to find
Not
that.
just that, and
Yeah,
then and we don't see ourselves in practitioners, and then when we do go into those settings, we feel like we will be misunderstood. There's that fear of being misunderstood, and it's not just a fear of being misunderstood. We're forgetting the fear of being judged. When you know that that person is not of your cloth, and that they're probably, that, and we already know that racism in the world right now, it's like each individual black man is an emissary of the entire race. If he does one thing, it means we all do
yeah.
that. So we know
We all
that.
become
So
yeah,
then you want us to go into that situation and show vulnerability
yeah.
in that sense? Why would we do that? So this is why. So all of these things are hindrances to us actually accessing mental health services, and this I just brought out two. There's so many of them. There, and that's not even looking
But
at
I did.
within our own selves. Yeah.
I mean, I did love that about the art because the Shades of Noir article. The Battle of Us, and looking at that, reading your article, I thought because you wrote that, didn't you? That
I
was
did.
it was
I did.
yeah. So reading
It
that
hasn't
article,
been thrown out yet, as in
no,
like
no, no.
published yet,
But what I
but it's
okay.
but yeah.
I mean,
No, no, you can.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. No,
I mean, because I
feel
would
free.
really like to kind of unpick some of the stuff that was being said in the article.
As soon as it's published and it's put out there, then I might have to edit a few things, but
Yeah,
as soon as
yeah.
it's published out, I will definitely.
Definitely, but what I definitely picked up on was, as you said, also, coupled with this idea of all the constructs of race and how we're positioned in the world, and then looking at having agency and
Yeah.
not having agency, and externalizing all of these issues as seen as something that you're just a passenger along for the ride, that you can't affect any change to impact your circumstances. But I felt what was equally interesting was where you talked about the deficit of how mental health is seen, particularly within the black community.
Yeah.
How we view it. But it's just kind of looking at the perception of black men and black people in terms of how they access
Yeah.
support, but in particular the deficit around. And I know for me growing up, if you spoke about mental health or had anything where you felt that there were any issues mentally, ultimately you being locked up.
Yeah.
And there was associations to schizophrenia,
Oh,
to
yeah.
the most extreme sense of kind of mental ill health,
Mhm.
is where people would often go. And as we know, statistically, the response to black men in particular, to say the wider populace and other people within the population, other ethnic groups, is very different.
Yeah.
Extremely different. Some are going to be exploring talking therapies, whereas us is more likely to look at sectioning, being medicated,
And then people ask questions like, why don't we trust? Why don't we access these services? And then when we interact with mental health services, especially at that level, I call it a punitive stage. So it feels like it feels like a punishment, because essentially, think about it: when you're going to jail, or like when you get arrested, when you get detained, how is it done? It's pretty much done. I mean, there might be a little more therapeutic in terms of what section it, but it's still restrictive. It's all restriction. This is what it feels like, restriction. And think about it: if restriction happens in that setting and it happens in the other setting, maybe some tweaks and slight differences. How are you not going to internally think about this the same way? So automatically you will not go, and that is passed on through generations. No, we don't do that. That's not our thing. This is not. This is, like I said, it's just, I get really just like, I get overwhelmed at how many factors and how much work needs to be done. I get overwhelmed when I think about it. Like we just touched on 4 now. We're gonna keep going as this goes on. We'll find, and I'm pretty sure we can find as many as possible. And a lot of people some people say that that this just sounds like excuses, but these are real. These are real factors that affect it. Real factors. This is why. And then I was gonna segue into studies and how it's important to evidence these things, because in order to actually communicate with the powers that be, you have to speak their language in terms of academically and prove the ethic. While we're doing things exactly, when we're doing things, we can do things for ourselves. But I feel like this progression has to happen on a twofold level. It can't just be us doing stuff for ourselves. We need the other side. But at the same time, we need to educate the other side, but the other side doesn't tend to listen unless it's brought to them in the language that they can understand. And that's why we need to get to it when it comes to academia, black academia, when it comes to like research in these social interactions are very important. This is a very important thing.
And if we can't see ourselves as practitioners, then who's doing the research?
Well, there you go.
Exactly. So
and then the research,
catch.
The bias in research is something that you cannot circumvent. So why would you not try to diminish that amount of bias as much as you can in terms of, you won't diminish the bias, but you'll just change the polarity of the bias, as in make it a bit more lean into our side in terms of being able to understand someone coming from that particular situation that they are investigating.